Welcome back. We move now to some international news. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa opened the Hannover Messe 2022 event, which is Germany's important industrial trade fair. In his speech, the German Chancellor thanked industry for supporting the sanctions against Russia despite its own losses. Scholz added that the current situation showed that the turning away from fossil fuels was also a question of domestic security. The Chancellor promised the industry extensive political support in the process of change. The world's largest industrial show will be held this year in a 4-day shortened form, which was cancelled in 2020 due to the pandemic. And this time it will be attended in person for the first time in 2 years. The new Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, launched by the US, has been widely questioned in terms of its incentives, initiatives, and tangible benefits for its members. It was highlighted by the spokesman of China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, CCPIT, Yu Yi. Noting that downward pressure on the world economy is increasing and economic globalization is encountering adverse effects, Yu Yi said that the business communities of all countries have a stronger desire for peaceful development, a stronger call for equity, justice, and a more urgent pursuit of all-win cooperation. Yu Yi pointed out that the IPEF does not include plans for negotiations on lowering tariffs, nor does it include broad measures to remove barriers to market access. The success of the Asia-Pacific economy lies in openness, cooperation, and mutual benefit. Yu said that the Chinese business community welcomes the initiative that are truly conducive to strengthening regional cooperation. The Chinese business community believes that the relevant initiative should contribute to the prosperity and the development of the region. We now move on to our collaboration with Biztech Asia, where our colleague Ibrahim Fernandez speaks with Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank, on Asia stocks rise ahead of major economic data that is coming in this week.
Speaking of the half-full glass situation, you probably want to take a look at some historical precedents, and you've got some charts to show us that.
Yes, exactly. So this is a bit of a reminder to us why markets sometimes start fretting a hawkish Fed. If you look at this chart, this tracks from 1990 onwards. Any phase during which the Fed has hiked rates significantly, typically is followed by a recession. All these gray bars you see here are recessions. This bar here is shorter than the rest because this was not a US recession, but it was the Asian financial crisis. So that's important to remember as well. Even if the US can avert a recession given their stronger economic momentum and more buffers, there are clear and present dangers to EMs, including EM Asia. And this time around, if you look at the amount of rate hikes that are priced in by markets, I dare say we are not in the territory of sanguine outlooks. We are, I think, we are probably going to be faced with some recession risks, and it's a very narrow path for the Fed to work itself into a position where it can engineer a soft landing. This very quickly, the reason why these rate hikes and tightening cycles become an issue is that along with quantitative tightening, we have an amplified flows impact and a stock impact. The flows impact is that you get higher financing costs. Quantitative tightening actually drains dollar, so you get a physical liquidity dollar squeeze, and you also have a stronger US dollar that not only erodes spending power, but now I think it's at the worst time. It's going to increase imported inflation, which then spirals back to weaker currencies in the region. So that's your flows impact. You also got rate hikes, which bring up the discount rate, immediately bring down asset prices, something we've evidenced not last week, but the prior weeks to that 6 weeks. And quantitative tightening increases both term and credit premium. That's to say, over and above whatever rate hikes the Fed is doing, we may end up paying even more in terms of interest rates. In this kind of environment, the best mitigations are positive cash flow, ability to manage the debt, not only in terms of paying off now and the total quantum, but how it's structured. Having dollar revenues or some kind of offset, inflation hedge or pricing power, these are all going to be quite advantageous to anyone who's facing the headwinds from the Fed.
Baik, Ibrahim, sebenarnya ini merupakan antara perkembangan terkini yang kita terima berkaitan dengan monkeypox.
cacar monyet.
Cacar monyet
Ya.
sebenarnya perkara yang semakin dibimbangi, walaupun WHO kata menyifatkannya bukanlah merebak dengan cara yang begitu teruk sekali, tetapi ia masih lagi terkawal. Dan negara jiran kita Thailand sebenarnya melaporkan kes pertama. Jika anda boleh saya kongsikan laporan oleh Thai PBS menyatakan bahawa Thailand melaporkan kes pertama melibatkan cacar monyet, melibatkan penumpang yang transit di negara tersebut yang menuju ke Australia, di mana jika boleh saya kongsikan sedikit, sebenarnya pengembara tersebut travel ataupun dari Eropah dan juga stopover berhenti seketika di sebuah lapangan terbang antarabangsa di Bangkok dalam tempoh 2 jam untuk transit menuju ke Australia, dan itu perkara yang dinyatakan oleh Disease Control Department ataupun Jabatan Kawalan Penyakit di Thailand, dan juga kru serta penumpang penerbangan tersebut telah pun dikenal pasti dari segi close contactnya, dan tempoh kuarantin telah pun dilaksanakan untuk tempoh 7 hari. Dan ini antara perkembangan awal yang boleh kami bawakan. Perincian lanjut akan kami bawakan dalam buletin-buletin awani yang seterusnya. Dan seterusnya kita nak melihat kepada antara perkembangan lain, Ibrahim.
Okay, let's start with the local bourse because the KLCI is actually down 3.46 points to 1,539 with close to 600 million shares done with a value of about 300 million ringgit. Gainers and losers are about the same with 279 green, 281 red. And of course, some key movers include Hibiscus, Petroleum, DNEX and Yongtai. We start with some focus companies. QL Resources Berhad's net profit dropped 39.43% to 69.39 million ringgit for the fourth quarter ended March 31st this year, from 114 million ringgit a year earlier. And of course, amid sharply higher raw material price, rising fuel costs and disrupted operations, earnings per share fell 2.85 cent from 4.71 cent, the group said in a bourse filing recently. And the lower earnings was despite a 12.62% rise in revenue to 1.37 billion, up from 1.22 billion. Moving on to some other news, we have Guangchong Berhad. This is because Guangchong Berhad posted a 57% increase in its net profit to 53.27 million for the first quarter ended March 31st, 2022 from 39.9 million in the previous year's corresponding quarter. This is supported by higher grinding margins. In a filing with Bursa Malaysia, they say that the revenue for the quarter grew 3.2% to 990 million ringgit, up from 960 million ringgit a year prior. The group declared a first interim single-tier dividend of 1.5 cent per share that is made payable on 12th July this year. In other news, we want to focus on the banking sector because Public Bank saw its net profit for the first quarter ended 31st March this year down by 8.59%. It's not often you get to hear that from Public Bank, but alas, here we are, to 1.4 billion ringgit from 1.53 billion ringgit a year ago due to the recognition of the prosperity tax or cukai makmur. EPS declined slightly to 7.21 cent from 7.88 cent, and in a filing with Bursa Malaysia yesterday, the banking group said that its quarterly revenue dropped by 2.84% to 4.89 billion compared to 5.03 billion previously. The group did not declare any dividends for the quarter. Yet another interesting thing coming from Public Bank. So, Acap, apa view tentang isu-isu sekarang ni, sebab banyak kita dah nampak dah harga saham tadi naik turun dan sebagainya. So kita pun nak tahu macam mana impaknya terhadap ekonomi menyeluruh.
Betul. Sudah tentu antara perkara Sapura tengah panas kan dalam sejak daripada debat apa semua sangat panas. Okey, antara keputusan berkenaan dengan Sapura ini adalah apabila anak syarikatnya ataupun anak syarikat milik penuh Sapura Energy Berhad ataupun Sapura 3000 Private Limited memeterai memorandum perjanjian untuk penjualan kapalnya dikenali sebagai Sapura 3000 dengan nilai 313 juta ringgit ataupun 71.5 juta dolar Amerika. Okey, apa yang anda saksikan inilah kapalnya, iaitu yang dipanggil sebagai Sapura 3000, dan inilah ataupun syarikat yang akan dijual kepada di mana ia merupakan kapal yang akan pasang siap dan juga crane yang dengan 7 feeder company lah dia untuk syarikat Abu Dhabi Ports Group. Jadi kita nak tengoklah penjualan ni.
Punya anak I Love You 3000. Sapura Energy sangat aktif pada pagi ini. Sangat aktif. Over 55 million shares being traded as of 9:57 AM. Price is at 8 cent.
Okey, antara perkara lain juga yang kita nak beri fokus adalah berkenaan dengan sedikit laporan daripada MEFCOM. Flight ataupun penerbangan pada melibatkan semasa raya hari itu sebenarnya terdapat 495 penerbangan ataupun 8% daripada lebih 6,000 penerbangan mencatatkan penundaan penerbangan melebihi 1 jam sepanjang tempoh 29 April hingga 9 Mei iaitu semasa tempoh Aidilfitri yang lalu. Okey, jika saya boleh kongsikan sedikitlah antara penerbangan ataupun syarikat-syarikat penerbangan yang terlibat adalah kalau kita ambil contoh Air Asia 2,954 penerbangan, 13% ataupun 368 penerbangan mengalami penundaan melebihi 1 jam. Ada juga daripada Malaysia Airlines melibatkan 3% ataupun 44 penerbangan. Maswings juga ada, Firefly juga ada. Batik Air yang sebelum ini dikenali sebagai Malindo Air juga mengalami penundaan penerbangan. Ini laporan awal daripada MEFCOM lah.
So ada a few news juga yang berkaitan dengan airline industry iaitu Air Asia Right Back telah resulting in its profits coming back. Air Asia is heavily traded at 2.4 million shares. 2.5 cent up, 66 cent and a half right now. And then of course airports with MAHB is up down 10 cent, pardon me, 6 ringgit 42 cent. Those are the kind of developments that we can bring as of this morning.
Okay, alright. Sekian saja Niaga Awani untuk waktu ini. Saya Harits Asyraf Hasnan.
Saya Ibrahim Sani.
Salam hormat.